Members, good morning. It's time when we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Subcommittee on Matters relating to the development of the Northern Metropolis. Item 1, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 21st of July 2023. It's a Friday, and it will be from 10:45 to 12 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. The item to consider will be an overview of boundary control points. And then the Secretariat has also arranged to have one meeting with the administration each month from October to December. After the details are fixed, members will be informed. Now, next item, opening up the nomination for the vice chairmanship again. Now, when members signed up, we invited nominations for the vice chairmanship, deputy chairmanship, but then there were no nominations. But then later on, some members suggested we might need a deputy chairman. So, do you agree we should elect a deputy chairman? Ms. Andrew Lam, you agree? Okay. In that case, at the meeting on the 21st of July, we'll include an item election of deputy chairman, and then the secretary will invite nominations soon. Please refer to Appendix 2 for the details. Now, the discussion item today, overall planning of the Northern Metropolis. First, I'll invite the administration to join us, that is the Secretary for Development and her team. As I said, the Secretary for Development, Ms. Bernadette Lin, is here. There's also Mr. Vic Yao, Director of the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office, and the Deputy Chairman of the office, Ms. Pak Vin Young. So welcome all of you to the meeting. First, I'll invite the Development Bureau to take us through the paper. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to thank members for joining this new subcommittee and consider the development of the Northern Metropolis. Well, we've always been saying that the Northern Metropolis is under construction. In the next 10 years, among the 3,200 hectares of spade-ready sites to be made available, the Northern Metropolis will contribute some 1,300 hectares. And Northern Metropolis will be important land resources for residential use. Also, it will meet public aspirations for larger living space. And also, another special feature of the National Metropolis is that there will be large tracts of land for industrial and economic development, and that will help to promote high quality collaboration with Shenzhen and help us integrate into the national development of the country. So that's why we must seize upon these opportunities. I would like to take this opportunity to thank members again for giving us the manpower resources to set up the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office. The office was set up on the 12th of June this year, and under the leadership of the director of the office, the government will move full steam ahead to promote the development of the Northern Metropolis. Now, in future meetings of this subcommittee, I understand you will be considering different items by categories, for example, ecology, conservation, industrial development, tourism, and so on. So perhaps today is like a warm-up session, and then Mr. Yao will walk you through the overall planning of the metropolis. Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the first meeting, so allow us to give you an overview of the overall development planning of the Northern Metropolis. The scope, it covers 7 land boundary control points. There are a number of mature new towns, and there are also various new development areas, either under planning or under development. I will be going through the NDAs one by one later. The Northern Metropolis is one of the key policy initiatives of this government in the 2022 in the 21 policy address. Say that it's a new engine for Hong Kong to scale new heights. Is also foothold for strategic development. The Northern Metropolis is also for us to respond to the National 14th Five-Year Plan, because the 5-year plan supports Hong Kong's development into an international innovation and technology hub, and also Hong Kong is to be a part of the world-class city cluster in the Greater Bay Area. So these are all national policies and strategies. The Northern Metropolis has multiple objectives instead of a single objective. It covers 30,000 hectares of land, and 3,000 hectares is newly developed land. If we consider our projection for ready sites in the next decade, Northern Metropolis will account for 40% of that, and also it's an important source of land supply for housing, and also so there will be 500,000 new units to be provided that will help us to address the acute housing shortage. At the same time, it will meet public aspirations for larger living space. Now, apart from residential housing development, Northern Metropolis will also give us unprecedented space for industrial development. There will be new development land, and also strategically is in close proximity to BCPs. That's why that will be useful. For example, the Sentin Technopole. Hopefully, we can make use of the Sentin Technopole to integrate with Shenzhen on INT development, and hopefully there will be land for INT industries. And of course, for different industries, we will consider the various policies, and so that there will be flexible land use arrangement and land lease arrangement. Conservation is another important objective. There will be an proactive policy to resume private land, but for land with a high ecological value, this will be merged into a wetland parks conservation system, wetland conservation park system, and then connectivity with covers both cross-boundary connectivity. So there will be cross-boundary railway going to Shanghai and the Northern Line, Spur Line, and then there's also domestic connectivity, that is connection with the Kowich Artificial Islands and with the East Rail and so on. So that's to link up the area with the urban areas. And then there will also be the new highway, Northern Metropolis Highway. This will help to link up the east and the west of the metropolis. So we plan to build a metropolis with a population of 2.5 million, providing 650,000 jobs. In the next 5 years, we hope to start the land resumption processes for all the development projects. And then within 10 years, 40% of the new development land will have completed site formation, and also 40% of the new units will be completed for population intake. Let me now explain the various NDAs and their positioning. Hong Shui Kiu is close to the Shenzhen Bay BCP, and there will be a railway connection with Shanghai. And to the south, there will also be railway connection to the Kowich Artificial Islands. That's why it has conditioned to become a modern service center. providing professional services and modern logistics services. Actually, first phase work started in 2020. The first batch of public housing will be ready for occupation in 2024. And then in 2026, the commercial land will have completed site formation, and there will also be some logistics sites. Hopefully, we could invite tenders by 2024, in the early part or even. And then Yunlong South to the east of Hong Shui Kiu is mostly to provide housing units. So it's a southern extension of the Yunlong New Town. The first phase of the work started in 2022, and the first batch of population intake is in 2029, hopefully. As for Shanting Technopole, I won't say too much on that because at the development panel we gave a briefing recently. And we're now in a 2-month public engagement exercise. So this 300 hectares land for innovation and technology. In terms of planning, we would like to provide more flexibility to accommodate different users and I&T enterprises of different scales. So on what I&T businesses will move into here, and our strategy is so on the Innovation, Technology and Industry Bureau will start a consultancy study soon. Kutong North and Ling North, this is where we started works the earliest. Actually, the first batch of population intake was in last year. And then there are 2 sites already sold in 2021. And then in 2026, the bulk of population intake will take place. And in 2027, the Kutong Station will be commissioned. So we plan to extend northwest to Ma Chou Long, and we are now doing a land use study. For Kutong North, there's a function. So we have reserved sites in Kutong North for future government office development. So we hope to move government offices without specific location requirements to the Northern Metropolis. So in Kutong North, we have earmarked a site for the development of a government complex. And we move further eastwards past the East Rail, then is the Ta Ku Ling Law Wu Man Kam To. We are now doing land-use studies. It also covers the New Territories North New Town. So it covers Shenzhen, Luohu, Yanshan, and there are 3 BCPs, Luohu, Mankamto, and Hengyun Wei. So we believe there is potential for developing a diversity of industries and providing various job opportunities. Hopefully by early next year, we'll come up with preliminary land use proposal.
Towards the east, Shuttlecock Ramban's Nest is mostly for recreation conservation purposes, and there are some tourism proposals. In 2022, the government launched a scheme for opening up the Shuttlecock Pier, and it's planned to gradually open up the entire Shuttlecock Frontier closed area for individual tourists other than tour groups. And we will look at the Shuttlecock Frontier closed area holistically together with the clearance arrangement for Chongying Street to facilitate tourism development in the area. And there is also a robin's nest in the area. In 2024, we target to designate about 500 hectares of land in the robin's nest as a country park to echo with the Shenzhen Wutong Mountain Scenic Area, creating a tourism opportunities. In 2022 policy address, mentions that with regard to the Northern Metropolis, we will have a action plan and agenda. It laid out the development blueprint as well as concrete implementation plan as well as timeline. Our coordination office, as mentioned by the Secretary, it was established in June, and it will set out measures and projects after that, and we will follow up on the progress of the implementation of the projects and make regular reports. That's all for my presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Now we invite members to put questions. Each member will have 5 minutes, including question and answer. Now I will talk about, I'll read out the orders of members who press the button. Chen Yip-ming, Lo Chung-hong, Yu Pak-lan, Andrew Lam, and then me, myself, Ms. Regina Ip, and William Wong. I will first invite Chen Yip-ming to speak. Thank you. Thank you. Although I'm only attending in attendance, I would like to speak on the overall development of the Northern Metropolis. I will have to declare interest. I am the chair of Taku-Ling Rural Committee. Taku-Ling is a part of the Northern Metropolis. I would like to thank Secretary and the Coordination Office once again that earlier this month you conducted site visits in the east of Taku-Ling in the Northern Metropolis to leverage on the advantage of the 3 boundary control points in terms of the development of the new territories, new town development and Mankamto. It serves great help to have this Northern Metropolis for their development. Taku-Ling is a new town in the New Territories North and is the greatest and the largest town in the Northern Metropolis. In the Taku-Ling, there are over 1,500 hectares with potential economic development. And it can work together with the Santing Technopole and the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park, and it's also next to Lowu Patson. I read from the papers that there will be 2.5 million people living in the areas with 650,000 job opportunities. But comparing with the Victoria Harbour CBD, there is great potential for improvement. We hope that Taku-Ling can serve greater purpose in terms of economic and industrial development. Last year, we have engaged surveyors to come up with proposals for Taku-Ling. Hopefully, in the summer holidays, we will have a preliminary proposal such that our Secretary can know about our ideas. First, how we can adopt infrastructure-led approach for Taku-Ling to implement the Hong Kong Shenzhen economic belt vision. And second, how we can make use of the land in Taku-Ling to serve the south-north engines of Hong Kong to greater contribute to the economic development of Hong Kong. Third is on the feasibility of urban-rural integration. So how indigenous inhabitants can serve in the development of Hong Kong. So in terms of the New Territories North, New Town, and Mankamto development, I hope that Secretary can adopt an open-minded approach. Thank you. Thank you. Secretary, please. First, I would like to thank Ms. Chen Yiming's question, and we look forward to receiving your proposal on Taku-Ling. Just now, you mentioned that the draft will cover various areas. In terms of infrastructure-led approach, this is the principle adopted by the government as well. But then, of course, we would like to look into the details of your proposal. For the other 2 ideas, actually, for industry, we hope that, well, we actually have also mentioned this in the papers as well. We want diversity in Taku-Ling. In Hong Shui Kiu, we use put logistics and modern industries first, modern service as the priority in Taikoo Link. As for Santin, it's for INT. And in terms of Taikoo Link, we can adopt a more diversified pathways. In the papers, we have set out a few possibilities. So why we focus on food technology as an industry? Because there are a lot of fresh food coming from the mainland to Hong Kong. Logistics, because on the west there is Hongshui Kiu and there is 3 boundary control points there, so we can work on modern logistics in Taikoo Link. As for personal health and other areas, after resumption of normal travel, we understand that a lot of mainland people would like to travel to Hong Kong to make use of these services. So these are the possibilities. Ms. Chen, you are familiar with the area. If you notice anything interesting in the people flow of the area that we can work on, we would welcome your suggestion. As for urban and rural integration, in the Santin Technopole, we will communicate with Hun Yikok as to how we can work out the details of it. And in Taikoo Link and Pingche, we're happy to hear your views. Thank you. Next, Mr. Ho Chung Hong. Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. First, I am mostly concerned about employment because in the Northern Metropolis, we want high-quality development, and we need high-quality employment to complement with that. 650,000 job opportunities. Do you have a concrete timeline or a KPI as to the categories of these jobs that will be available, and how will these jobs when will these jobs become available? Well, you do have a very concrete timelines in terms of housing, but in terms of industries and employment, will you have a more clear timeline for them so that government departments can catch up on the enterprise attraction? When will these 650,000 jobs become available? Because for people living in the new territories, they have to travel for a long time for them to arrive at the urban area. If you can create these 650,000 job opportunities, it solves the traffic issues in turn. Second, I see that in the Northern Metropolis, for the new town and NDAs, you have integrated them, and there is some expansion areas. One of which that I'm concerned about is Hongshui Kiu Ha Chun expansion area to Lao Fao Shan Chin Pei Chui and Park Nai Wong Chen. Because there are a number of small houses there, there are some indigenous inhabitants villages, and there are some pig farming and agriculture, go downs industries there. I am rather familiar with the area. Some people ask me about the timeline there, and they wonder if the government has a preliminary proposal on land use of that area, because next to the NOLA there is a Tin Shui Wai new town. Do you have a timeline? And I want you to incorporate the energy policy into the study of the Northern Metropolis, because in the members' bill earlier, we try to encourage introduction of energy from the mainland. So energy cost is a very important factor for attracting investments from overseas. So one of my initiatives is that, well, if Santin Technopole, including the INT Park in Lok Ma Chau Loop, if the electricity of those areas can be supplied by the mainland, such that they can pay less than $1 per kilowatts. It may help with the development of the industries there, especially for those INT industries, say data center that requires a higher usage of electricity. So will you incorporate the energy policy into the Northern Metropolis development strategy? Thank you. Secretary, 3 questions on timeline for industry and Chimpaknao timetable, as well as energy policy. Chairman, regarding the first question on the timetable for creation of jobs, as well as what types of jobs they are, for Kutong Park, Futong North and Hongshui Q, because they have already been developed, we know that we know about the distribution of jobs and the job types. We may be able to supply supplementary information after the meeting. Just now, there are a lot of places we're still conducting study on. Earlier next year, we will complete the study, and by then we will have a more concrete picture. As for what types of jobs will be created and if we can strike a balance between home and job, allow me to say that we always will try our best to do something, but we may not be able to create jobs next to members of the public's home because Hong Kong is not a large place, but that is why we focus on the infrastructure, because if we want to make it convenient for people to travel to work. In terms of INT and Shanty Technopole, we want to create talent and accommodations in the Technopole. We have different pathways for design, but as to whether or not we can ensure that people can work with and live within the same area, we may not be able to do so. As for energy policy, we see that as a very important element in the development strategy. For the supply of energy or electricity, it is one of the biggest concern of ours, as there are different teams in the working groups in the EEB that are in close liaison with the mainland authorities and counterparts. We will work with the working groups of EEB to follow up. For the next question, I would like the director to respond. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, Mr. Look mentioned about Chimpaknao and the development positioning as well as timetable of it. As for logistics, as this expansion of the Hongshui area, we are conducting land use study. So it's underway. But I can share with you that about our initial ideas for Chimpaknao. What are its advantages and characteristics? First, there is a habitat. It has a long coastal area with reed beds and mangroves. So in terms of ecotourism, there is potential. On economic positioning, in Hongshui is next to Nanshan and Shanghai in Shenzhen. Apart from Shenzhen Bay, there will be a boundary railway linking the areas. If we set up a station in Chimpaknao, that station will be closer to Shanghai and Nanshan, Shenzhen than Hongshui. So we will look into how Hongshui can position as a modern service center and how it can complement with other areas. As for Nanshan and Shanghai, as you know that in terms of INT professional services, they are very strong in those areas. So in the Chimpaknao expansion area, how can it complement Hongshui and Shanghai's alignment, and how we can make use of the area such that we can facilitate the journey between Hong Kong and Nansha. And how we can promote economic development in the area. These are the focus of our land use study. Thank you.
Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that I can join this subcommittee on the Northern Metropolis, because the Northern Metropolis in the overall planning stage, so if we can get involved and see how we could develop the Northern Metropolis in the livable place with tourism. Of course, I'm concerned about tourism. There are rich tourism resources in the Northern Metropolis, the Lau Fao Shan in the west, to the Maipo Nature Reserve, and then to the east, the Yan Chao Tong. Well, there are plenty of beautiful sceneries and unique natural habitats. Now, tourists say that we have paradise, and then on Earth we have Su Hang, but then in Hong Kong we have Yan Chao Tong, because the scenery there is truly beautiful. So I'd like to find out from the administration at this stage. Now, in the overall planning of the Northern Metropolis, and in terms of tourism development in particular, do you have any preliminary planning considerations? I'm particularly concerned about Yan Chao Tong and Sha Tao Kok. You know, on the other side, that's the Yan Tian of Shenzhen last year. Development blueprint was published. And on our side, it seems that there is nothing concrete yet, except that we have opened up a small part of the Sha Tao Kok Pier. But other than that, we've not done anything else. Now, if we want to develop tourism, we have to consider traffic and transport facilities, parking spaces, catering facilities, and so on. So that's why we need to get involved so we can work together on the planning. Another question is, now the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office has been set up. Now, we hope we will be exploring Northern District themes or subjects. So for the coordination office, probably you're going to set up different working groups on different themes, right? Because there is need for extensive cross-bureau collaboration. You might even invite a sector to get involved. For example, would you set up a particular working group on tourism development, and you will involve, therefore, the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau, the Environment and Ecology Bureau, and also stakeholders in the tourism sector. So I wonder if you have any response. Thank you. Secretary, let me say a few words first, and then I'll ask the director to talk about Sha Tao Kok and what we have in mind now. For the under the coordination office, can we set up working groups? Well, the office is actually a small office, but it's comprehensive in a sense. But we are happy for the coordination office to do coordination, because that's what the office is supposed to do. So perhaps through you, Mr. Perry, we could meet with representatives of the sector and see where we could have more detailed discussion. But perhaps it's not possible for us to set up working groups and so on, because if we set up working groups, we have to provide secretarial service, and we may not have the staff to do that. But we are more than happy to have discussions with the sector. So perhaps the office will make arrangement to meet with the sector through you, Mr. Yu. And for apart from Sha Tao Kok, well, there are other notes as well. For example, the Northern Metropolis, there is a strong small town ambience. In fact, there have been a number of questions at the council meetings recently on how we could make the most of the monuments or the wartime heritage. There are also ancient temples in the Northern Metropolis. Hopefully, we are going to establish tourism trails. And we mentioned that to members some time ago at the development panel. So we'll see how we could identify the sites with potential, so they will give priority to them. And another function of the Northern Metropolis is Central Civic District. Because when there is improved accessibility, then many cultural activities could be held and people could go to the Northern Metropolis, travel to and from it on the same day, even for people coming from the other side of the boundary. And of course, we could link such cultural features to tourism as well. Mr. Yao? Just now I explained the overall development of the Northern Metropolis. There are plenty of tourism opportunities and resources. Well, I mentioned Lau Fau Shan and actually omitted to mention that Lau Fau Shan is in itself a tourist destination already. So can we do better in infrastructure? Well, we are now doing a land use review and we will certainly look into that. Now, the Secretary mentioned, traditional towns, and I even mentioned the wetland parks. In fact, in the development strategy, there's also mention of the possibility of developing greenways. So this is also one direction we can move in. And then I mentioned Shuttlecock. That is the eastern part of the metropolis. This will mainly be the tourism node. And in Shuttlecock, we have already taken measures to open up the pier. As for the opening up of the frontier closed area, we will be doing more too. And we also note the blueprint of the Shenzhen side. So we'll consider if it's possible to make even more adjustments in terms of BCP clearance and opening up of closed frontier areas. Because in Shire Khao Kok there are also monuments and heritage features. Well, actually outside Shuttlecock, the harbor there is really beautiful. So maybe we could consider cruises and whatever. And then our office is more than happy to facilitate discussion with the sector, apart from on top of the existing platforms and channels for communication. Thank you. Mr. Andrew Lam. I'd like to make a number of points, Mr. Chairman. Now, we call this the Northern Metropolis. So I always focus on the word metropolis. What's so special about it? Shenzhen is city, is a traditional city, and I always advocate smart cities and so on. I'm sure in the Central Waters reclamation there will be these features. But then for the Northern Metropolis, we can go further, even than neighboring cities. That's urban-rural integration. Second is industrial integration. I could explain that with one or two examples later. But coming back to the positioning of the Northern Metropolis, we have to be clear about that, and I have expectations here. Now, the North Metropolis is next to Shenzhen, so we are close to Shenzhen. So what are the plans of the Shenzhen side? The low economic belts, for instance, they plan to have an international consumption center there. So how do, as we plan Northern Metropolis, how do we coordinate with Shenzhen? We have to consider that. And then there'll be closer integration in future. So how can we make use of the Northern Metropolis to take in some southbound activities? And then we could, have such interaction in a more effective manner. I hope you will consider it. On industrial integration, just now Mr. Parry mentioned tourism. There are rich tourism resources in the area, but at the same time we need to draw red lines for environment conservation. For example, in Zhoujiakou, there won't be hotels in the area in the national park, but then we need to be clear where we have to provide essential infrastructure that doesn't have an impact on the environment. Then we must provide these infrastructure. And then we can consider the periphery of the area. Maybe there's a potential for, say, hotel development. Now, if we invite tender for hotel now, I'm sure no one will submit a tender. But then the government needs to first formulate a policy, so with clear objectives, and the market will know what to expect. Now, we mentioned modern logistics, in particular in relation to fresh food or fresh provision. So this is an important aspect too, and I think Takuleng can play a role there. If we just look at the position of Takuleng in terms of logistics, and then there are limitations. But then if you add a wholesale function to it, then it's not the same thing. You look at the wholesale markets in many places, they serve dual functions. For example, modern agriculture farming and conventional farming, then together that will create different tourism resources. So we should consider industrial integration rather than segregation. Why I have come up with these examples is because we're considering urban-rural integration. In other top cities, they don't have the condition for this. New York, Tokyo, London, they don't have this condition. But for us, in the Northern Metropolis, we have the condition in this 1,100 kilometers of land. So therefore, we should leverage on it. But of course, we have to consider that it may be a long time frame. So what I want to say is that we need 2 more tools at the planning stage. Now we have existing planning procedures that is by way of outline zoning plan. That's not enough. So we need also strategic plans or structural plans, so we know what will happen in future. The director mentioned the action agenda, but under the action agenda, perhaps we need action plans to get to the finer details. Thank you.
Director, please. Thank you. I completely agree that there are things that we should work out with radiation effect. For example, in Pingche Takuleng, if we create this food manufacturing industry there, if we stop there, we only have food manufacturing. But member just mentioned that we can have a food wholesale market. We are actually thinking about food certification system, because we do have an advantage in this regard. If we link it up with the food industry, we can serve our country as a whole. because we have standards and certification. Certification itself can be an industry. As it's an industry, it will create other synergy effect. When we have our timetable and action agenda out, let me cite an example. For in East Kowloon Energetic Office, we always put more resources there to enrich the proposal. We will not adopt an agenda, action agenda all along. We always improve it. We note members' comments. We will follow up on it. Director, I agree with what Mr. Lam said. If I understand correctly, he said that first, when we are doing planning, we have to have a cross-boundary understanding of the Shenzhen. We have to understand their development in the future. Not only the development of it today in terms of software and hardware, say improvement in the cross-boundary control point and the functions of the districts there, as for example, the future development of Luobu. I completely agreed. We have to keep in close liaison with Shenzhen, and that's the area where we will focus on, and that's what we're working on as well. Second, Mr. Lam said that when we are creating industries, we should not have segregation in terms of policy creation for different industry because they can have synergy effect. Just now, Mr. Lam named a very good example. When we develop tourism, maybe we have to complement it with the other, for example, conservation policy. For example, in Chimpat now, we have to know the area of the coastal protection area before we can plan the area for tourism development. So there is integration between different policies and industries. So our coordination office will be working on this, and we will look into different policies by different bureaus, and we will look at different industry policy to see if there is any synergy that can be created. Thank you. I will wait all members finish speaking before I ask question. Mrs. Regina Ip, please. Thank you. I appreciate the question put by Mr. Look on employment. 650,000 jobs is a lot. We only have 3.6 million jobs available in Hong Kong. So what types of jobs are these 650,000 jobs? Because a railway expert told me that the most difficult thing for constructing railway in Hong Kong is because we only have one CBD in Hong Kong that is central. So everyone goes to Shenzhen, central, and then everyone leaves from central to home after work. So there has to be railway linking to central and Kowloon. If we have to construct railway leading to central, some electors told me that we need to build a Northern Hong Kong Island line. It's more expensive if you build in areas that are more densely populated. So why Shenzhen has the railway developed so well? Because they have a lot of green land. Actually, in Santin Technopole and Lok Ma Chau, we can build railway there. And the infrastructure design will be very different over there. So we need to know what types of jobs are these 650,000 jobs. It will affect our infrastructure investments because you have so many projects under this Northern Metropolis. You will spend a lot of money on it, and Secretary said that you can only let us know the figures next year. When will you be able to provide us with the breakdown of the jobs? Because the talents from the Santin Technopole will come from mainland or overseas. They will live in the Santin Technopole. They will not have to go to Kowloon or Hong Kong Island to work. For retail or restaurant staff, we only need locals. So do we have to build so many railways? You have to make the calculations right. Thank you. Secretary, please. Chairman, please allow us to go back and collate the figures. There are two things that we can do. First, we will work on the breakdown on the jobs in the Northern Metropolis and the studies that we have completed. Just now I mentioned that in Hongshi-Q, Yunnan, South, Hachun, we have conducted some studies with breakdown of jobs, including professional services and retail workers. When we have those figures, we will prepare a report on that. As for study that is still ongoing, we may not be able to tell you the figures, but we do have some basic information to share. I still have some time left. Yes, Mr. Yip. Just now, Secretary mentioned that the government would identify land for certification of food. Hong Kong has a good reputation on food quality or standards. Some people suggest if we can create this certification industry in Shenzhen or Greater Bay Area, we hope that we can have co-location arrangement for food inspection, such that Hong Kong's food can be tested on the mainland and sold to the mainland market. Well, although we have 300 hectares of land there, it is very valuable, and the mainland can help us with this. Can we deliver the food to the Greater Bay Area and have co-location arrangement for inspection over there? Chairman, we will note Mr. Ip's comments. We will study on it in the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office. Thank you. Mr. Sip, have you finished? Yes. Next, Wong Kam Fai. William Wong. Thank you. Chairman, I would like to talk about Mears Bay Yan Chao Tong Eco Recreation Tourism Circle, because there is rich marine resources over there, and there are two geoparks there. There is a Hong Kong geopark and the Da Pang Peninsula geopark. Have you considered developing these areas into a national marine parks, including ocean laboratory? To become a geopark is not easy. If you can do that, it will become the first national park in Hong Kong. It will facilitate conservation of the natural habitat as well as system and the unique landscape, heritage, and biodiversity in the area. So I wonder if the administration have considered this. Second, regarding INT, today we talked about Santin Technopole. As far as we understand, land has been set aside for INT development. And the Secretary has maintained close liaison with the ITIB because works can only be done well with planning. Do you have a regular coordination mechanism? If yes, can you share with us the mid, medium, and long-term strategies that you have? My third question, regarding overall development. We have, of course, it's a good thing that we have a Northern Metropolis Coordination Office, but to do things well, we have to coordinate with the Shenzhen counterparts. However, we seems to be only establishing working groups in this regard. Will we establish more concrete kind of offices with the Shenzhen authorities? Director, please. Thank you. Regarding conservation and tourism development in Mirs Bay, in the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy, it mentions that it is a place rich in natural resources. So together with the EEB, we will see if there is any policy for conservation. As mentioned, in the Robin's Nest, we do have a plan to designate it as a country park. As to if we will turn it into a kind of national park, this is a new suggestions that we have. We will look into that. I would like to supplement on INT. There are much things that we can do. Recently, we have a coral's mother. She's done very well in terms of coral conservation. I think that it will help with INT development and conservation. That's the relationship between INT and conservation. Your second question, I believe that it has to do with INT uses and our coordination with ITIB. As for division of duties, ITIB is responsible for INT policy. As for us, we focus on land uses. After establishment of the NMCO, we have been in close liaison with them. In terms of land use proposal, when we are working that out, we have been having close communication with them, and they have proposed some suggestions. For example, the locations of the INT enterprises and the collaboration with the loop, the INT park in the Lok Ma Chau loop. The ITIB will conduct a study to look into the INT policy in the area. And in that study, we will take part in it actively because we understand that land is a very important element in the policy. And we will streamline town planning ordinance to help with the ITIB and to work with the purposes of IT development, and we will work with the ITIB on their study. Lastly, in terms of collaboration with Shenzhen counterparts, as for the working groups that members have mentioned is one of the structure. Apart from having meetings on working level, NMCO and our Shenzhen counterparts and the municipal governments, we have close liaison with them, including Nanshan, Qianhai, Futian, as well as Luowu, Yantian authorities. We have close liaison with them. We have a close working relationship. Do we have to have a actual office? We will look into that, but what we can say is that we have close communication with each other.
Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members, for your views, because my thinking similar to yours. Now, Mrs. Regina Ip mentioned in particular that for food certification, can we make use of the mainland facilities? Yes, it makes sense, but then in Hong Kong, we also need to keep, say, demonstration laboratories. And so I think it's similar to that of Mr. Andrew Lam for food products. They're not just for supplying to Hong Kong. As Mr. Perry Liu mentioned, it may become a new tourist destination like Fengzhou, and that it brings about economic benefits. So for those who are affected, we should provide them with other jobs. Perhaps in the past we relied too heavily on just a few industries, and so now we want more diversity, and we want to bring people into the Northern Metropolis. for the food industry, like food certification. It's where we have some strengths. So that's why, yes, we need the mainland base, especially because the country has large food generation capacity. But then also we have an edge in certification, so we should keep part of the business in Hong Kong. Second point, Mr. Perry, you mentioned tourism. For the Northern Metropolis, there should be at least 3 new tourist attractions. For example, the food wholesale center, wholesale market, or trading center. And the other is the Sentin Technopole. They are going to resume 90 hectares of fish pond, but nearby there's a Sampo Shu Park. So maybe in other places like Hong Shui Kiu and so on, farmers could switch to different trades, say working in the Sam Shui Po tourist attraction. And then Mr. Andrew Lam mentioned a point. We mentioned that before. You see, on farmland, you can't even sell, say, strawberry juice, and you can't charge admission fees because then that becomes a commercial use. So the legislative restrictions are too stringent right now, and so we need to relax the arrangement. Now, Vic mentioned Lau Tau Fan. It is now a very primitive and backward tourist destination. Yes, many visitors go there, but the government's not giving Lau Tau Shan any support. People put up small stores. Yes, that's appealing. But then just outside Lau Tau Shan, there's a Shenzhen Bay Bridge. And there are many oyster rafts there. You probably overlook their value. Hong Kong oysters are well known. They are actually called Hong Kong oysters as a brand. And then if you ask people to go to Shanmei instead to run oyster farms, then it's not the same thing. So if you talk about urban-rural integration, and I had discussion with you, Mr. Yao, it seems that you never consider giving some land along the coastline, just a bit of land for coastline. We've lost even our last oyster sauce factory. When I walked past in the park before, the factory was in operation, but now there's no government support, so we no longer have oyster sauce factories here. But then, and so people actually buy oyster sauce from the mainland to sell in Lau Fau Shan. Now, if you look at urban-rural integration on the mainland, they actually merge many different elements, and they even do cultural crossover. So you have to consider these 3 tourist destinations carefully. Now, in your previous paper on Sentin Technopole, you set aside a small plot of farmland. And then I was worried initially that's all with the farmland, but after I had a meeting with Mr. Yao, I explained to you we don't want we want city farms to be integrated. Say in Sentin Technopole is mainly IT land, but then where there is open space, you will allow such farming. It's like giving them a coffee shop. And then you could include these urban farms, and that will help small-scale farmers to keep their operations. And also, of course, local residents would welcome fresh local produce, and so you can consider all that. Now, in Ma On Shan, I understand the government is doing a consultation on some form of a urban farm scheme. So if you think it's going to work, you could consider copying the idea here too. Thank you, Mr. Ho. I'm getting more and more encouraged listening to all these suggestions and ideas, because with the Northern Metropolis there are major goals, but then there are many fine details to consider as well. So if you give us all of your views, it will really help us. I'm very much encouraged by that. Now, for food testing and certification, it's not just about the mainland or Hong Kong. It's about how we have good division of work. So we will consider this along your line. So it's about division of labor, and it's about Hong Kong leveraging on its advantage. For example, in the construction industry is the modular integrated construction. That's our advantage. Now, it's not possible for us to have the manufacturing base in Hong Kong because we don't have enough land. But then we can do certification here. So it's something similar with the construction industry. For food certification, perhaps it's also about a division of labor of work. Now, for the food products and international trading center, whatever, it's not just about certification. There's also trading of local farm produce. Apart from certification, that means we can create more jobs for local residents. Thank you. Mr. Lee Chan-kung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Northern Metropolis development, of course, will go ahead, and the government expects the government to do a proper planning for this project. Now, there's mention of 300 hectares of land. How are we going to promote new development there? You know, the stuff that is about our outlook, is about having grander vision, and how do we tie in with the development on the mainland. So we have to consider all these aspects. We're told that you are in collaboration with many departments on the mainland, including provincial level governments. So can you tell us how you could further promote complementarity, you know, between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, for example, in terms of the flow of people and capital, and what about the flow of talents? What can you do? How can you provide the legal basis to facilitate a more expeditious boundary clearance, for example? And then in Qianhai, will you consider another express rail station? You know, Shenzhen, there's the North Station and the South Station, and at Lowwu, they are also building more express rail lines or high-speed rail lines. So will there be high-speed rail station in the Northern Metropolis to take people to the mainland or the Greater Bay Area? And then we could also have co-location arrangement to facilitate movement of people. That's the first question. Second question. Since the 18th Party Congress, the government's gone for the dual carbon objective or policy. Now, here there's a Northern Metropolis is like a blank canvas where you could plan development anew. What about green transport, green energy, like electric power, and what about renewable energy, and so on? How can you do better? And then will you also promote sharing, bicycle sharing, and so on? And in terms of legislation and standards, how do we integrate, coordinate that with the mainland? And there are existing industries. So how do you communicate better with, say, the fisheries industry or the logistics industry? How can you leverage on their existing experience so these operators could stay instead of just giving them compensation? People will move their businesses away and they won't come back. For example, if there's no longer fish in fish ponds, and for the logistics sector, there's no longer warehouse facilities, and what will happen? Secretary. Well, for the first three questions, if you don't mind, we'll have to give you an answer only later. For example, transport arrangement with Shanghai and all that, and including cycling and all that. Well, there will be there will be a separate discussion in this subcommittee on transportation. Perhaps I will then invite Transport and Logistics Bureau to answer your questions. And then also the green planning for Northern Metropolis. Again, I believe maybe we can have a dedicated meeting on conservation. We invite the relevant policy bureau and also the coordination office will come here to answer your questions. As for consensus reached with the mainland working groups, we've only started our actual work this year. Perhaps it's premature for us to tell you about the outcome of our discussion. But as we've explained, we meet frequently with the mainland counterparts, particularly Mr. Yao and his team. So we are still at this stage of understanding each other's visions and objectives, because we don't want vicious competition. We want synergy rather. So when the action agenda is published, I'm sure you'll be able to see the thinking. Finally, local operators, such as the brownfield operations and fisheries operations, if they're affected, well, we are in discussion with them actually. As for the logistics sectors, many will be affected. So we are considering two possibilities. One, we have said we're going to develop the brownfield sites. So we have to consider how many phases of development we should have, so that we could, push back the land clearance as far as possible. But then what we need to push forward is that there will be many sites for modern logistics, and so we're doing site formation, we perhaps. We thought initially would only complete site formation before we invite tender, but now maybe we could invite tender while we are doing site formation. So then the tender outcome will be available earlier, and then the relevant parties could plan much more in advance. So that's what we are thinking right now. Thank you.
This is a piece of very useful information. Next, Mr. Yim Kong, please. Thank you, Chairman. The government says that they will set aside INT land for INT Park in the Northern Metropolis. All along, government will lead the management and planning of the INT. There are few saying that introduction of private participation in the planning and development of Northern Metropolis will enhance efficiency and complement with the insufficient resources in the part of the government. The government says that they will adopt an open-minded approach. My question for the administration is that have you formulated policy to engage private partnership, and have any private enterprises say that they're interested in participating in the Northern Metropolis? My second question on mainland enterprises. Some of them have applied for establishing a mainland outlet in the Northern Metropolis. With their development, we can develop this outlet and it will attract people from the Hong Kong Island and Kowloon to do shopping over there. This can facilitate the business in the area. So I would like to ask about the administration. In terms of land disposal, will you consider land disposal methods other than traditional ones? Thank you. Secretary, please. Perhaps I take the last question on Chinese brand outlet, and then I will defer to Director for other questions. For mainland enterprises, if they are interested in creating such a venue in Hong Kong, they can get in touch with the NMCO or the Oasis. We can look at their needs and the operation models, because this Oasis has an internal communication mechanism with the Financial Secretary. If after listening to their proposal, we would like them to take root in Hong Kong, then the administration will look for land that is suitable for creating such a venue. And with such land available, should we grant the piece of land directly to the enterprise, or maybe if we know that there are other enterprises in the mainland that are interested in creating such island in Hong Kong, then we will make a decision as to whether or not we will do a direct land grant or if we will do other land disposals. But they can get in touch with NMCO or Oasis. Then I will defer to Mr. Yao. Thank you. Your first question, I believe, has to do with the development of the INT Park. We adopt an open-minded approach. As for Sentient Technopole, to a large extent, we have to look at the study of the ITIB on the land use and the development model. We will participate in the study. We do have some options available for us. Secretary mentioned just now, in the past when we are developing new development area, the site formation will be done by the CEDD. We will first do site formation, and if it's used for private purposes, then we may sell the piece of land or grant it or dispose it in other methods. Is there a flexibility in terms of land disposal? It will depend on the industry policy. If we want to engage certain enterprises, will that enterprise be able to do site formation or construction work by themselves? This is an option, and it also has to do with the cost of development, as mentioned by Mr. Yim. There are tools that we're adopting currently. We have an enhanced NDA model, allowing the landowner to apply for amendment to land lease. And to allow the landowner to participate in the development. We will adopt the same approach in these commercial or residential zones, or extend it to other areas, for example, logistics land or INT zones. We adopt an open-minded approach in developing this. That's all for my response. Thank you. Next, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, please. Thank you, Chairman. Northern Metropolis, I believe, can solve various issues that Hong Kong is faced with. It would be best if we can start as early as possible. I'm happy to hear that you have some preliminary ideas, but they are not comprehensive enough, I believe, because you have 300 kilometers square with railway and stations. We do see some concrete plans in place. This plan involves large-scale housing development. And when we talk about housing, it has to do with relocation of people. In the New Territories North and Northern Metropolis, there is traffic issues. Recently, I've been hearing about Pinkon Village residents saying that there is severe traffic congestion in the area. If you build more housing over there, it will worsen the situation. And they proposed some land sale conditions back then when they sold that land to the government. So I hope that there could be some level of transparency. You always talk about infrastructure-led principle. I hope that you can do better in terms of infrastructure and not delay it. Because if you cannot solve these logistics or transport issues, then there will be severe problems if there are more people working in the area. For Santin Technopole, I see that some construction has started. You say that 150,000 jobs will be created in the area. How can we make sure that when these 160,000 people work there, they will have a smooth journey? Otherwise, no one is willing to work there because near the Santin Technopole, there is barely any residential units. If we look at the IT and INT industry in Hong Kong compared to other places, we can be said to be at a starting point. We want more INT talent, of course, but I don't think that there is enough enterprises available for these talents to work at. Looking at Singapore, they are proactively nurturing this kind of INT enterprises. They keep their rent low. They create a very good environment to facilitate startups. Secretary, you mentioned just now we will have some special ways of handling things with enterprises. I believe that you were talking about large enterprises, but what about startups? How will you help them? The most important thing is that we can attract these enterprises and talents to Hong Kong and keep them here. Only by that can we turn Northern Metropolis into a INT hub. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary and Director, please. Chairman, regarding infrastructure-led principle, this is a must. On the Santin Technopole land use proposal that we've just put forward, we will start site formation in 2024, and the enterprise can only enter the place after 2024 and before 2030, before population intake. However, the Northern Link will be commissioned in 2034. Before commissioning, we have other infrastructure, transport infrastructures. This is the issues that we have to solve. Even with transport infrastructures, we may not be able to achieve our goals. Together with the Transport and Logistics Bureau, we are looking into whether or not we can advance the timetable for completion of Northern Link, and if we can work out the details of the transport facilities in the area. I believe that in the meeting on transport, the Transport and Logistics Bureau will have a detailed presentation. Chairman, In North District, we always talk about traffic issues because it's where we link, it's the main channel for linking to Shenzhen. During poor weather, when there's flooding, the roads will turn into rivers. It happens currently, and residents there told me that they fail to see any suggestions or proposals put forward by the administration that can solve such problems in the short term. And the administration says that they have policy to solve the problem, but how do you then allay their concerns on this area? Secretary, please. Thank you. I think that we can only let you know details information before after we have worked out the plan. As for Mr. Lam's question regarding large enterprises, in general, the enterprises that would like to enter Shenzhen Technopole, we will remove barriers for them. In terms of land planning, we try to list out more permitted land uses in terms of land use proposal. We will adopt a INT park mindset. And we have said publicly that we're willing to streamline our land disposal methods and adopt a more flexible approach. And there are some organizations in the community saying that if we can adjust the 50-year-long land lease, should we shorten the time of the land lease? The ITIB will conduct a in-depth consultancy study, and they have some preliminary ideas by the end of this year, and they will work out the details. Next, Dr. Kennedy Wong, please. Thank you, Chairman. Because we're talking about overall development today, so I hope that the administration will remember this. If we want to attract top-notch enterprises to Shenzhen Technopole or talents, including we have this top talent pass scheme. We understand that it's important to have a large number of housing, but in terms of density and quality, I hope that the administration will take these into account. If you want to attract top talents to the Northern Metropolis, their offices could be in Shenzhen Technopole or somewhere near Shenzhen. What will their living conditions be like? Will you have low-density residential area for people who are used to living in villas overseas or townhouses overseas? So apart from high-rise buildings, we can explore this direction. If you want to turn this into INT hub, you need an atmosphere or create an environment for that, because a lot of people like to work outdoor. Now you have a Yanqiaotong Country, a park. Is it possible for you to enhance facilities in that regard? Because I tried to stay overnight in Yanqiaotong. It was very beautiful, but it was a long journey. I have to go past Shaikong, and I hike all the time as well. So can you create maybe some new hiking trails there or outdoor facilities? Because people need to live. If you say, take an example, take a look at Silicon Valley, we have to create a similar environment before you can attract those talents. Thank you. Secretary, please.
Secretary? Well, I'll say a few words and then I'll hand over to the director. Quality matters, and thank you for raising the issue. Because we do hear views, different views, and some question, since there's the Northern Metropolis, why wouldn't you increase the housing density? Well, here we want to stand firm because we want the Northern Metropolis to be a livable district. We're talking about living space for the new generation, so we don't want the kind of development density like in existing new towns in Chunwan or Tinshui. No, we don't want that. That's why we are saying the highest PR would just be about 6.5. Of course, it won't be 6.5 for rural developments, but perhaps if a location is near a conservation area, then we'll have a stepped led approach. But then maybe there are individuals who prefer villa-type housing. Well, that's exactly what urban-rural integration is about, because there's the rural element, and in rural areas, usually we're just talking about buildings of 3 stories high. And so here, the opportunity is available for us to consider low-density development. That's why in Northern Metropolis, there won't be just a high-density development, but because we attach more importance to the housing quality. Director, thank you. Well, the member raised 2 important points. One is housing support, and the other is the living environment. Now, on housing, here we're talking about the INT talent and staff. We can take the Santin Technopole as an example. We mentioned INT sites. We hope that we would like to adopt a new planning approach to allow more flexibility. It will not be just R&D and production, and there will also be support facilities such as talent accommodation. So if we provide housing for talents, then probably such housing will be more compatible with the surrounding areas, and it will be of a lower density too. And in the Northern Metropolis, of course, there will be many new development areas, NDAs, and for the new NDAs, probably the development density will be a bit lower. And of course, still the majority will be building blocks, but then because Northern Metropolis is so large, it's possible that we have the more rural type of housing, and then private developers could, of course, submit applications for land grant, and we can consider different types of housing. Quality of living will be important. So we take Santin Technopole as an example. We will have industrial land, we have housing land. There is also the conservation park. The Shampo Shu Conservation Park is adjacent to the northern part of the Santin Technopole. So that means there will be a nice natural view or scenery. And then there will also be important cultural facilities such as performing venues and so on. This is to add a cultural element to the area. And we're not just targeting residents in the area, we're also targeting the INT staff working there. And you see the green shaded areas, this is open space. There will be a higher proportion of open space compared to the traditional NDAs, because we want to provide a nice open space for those working and living there. So for Northern Metropolis, one of the focus is quality of living. We want it to be a livable and workable metropolis. What about water activities, Mr. Chairman? Because to the east and to the west, there's the sea. So have you considered water sports facilities? Yes, we will consider that. If I could pick up on the point, the housing density and plot ratio are slightly different. Now, the Secretary said the maximum PR will be about 6.7. In Kutong, the maximum PR is 7. Perhaps you could also make reference to the urban districts. In some sites, you could allow a PR of 9. So that means you have taller blocks in a certain spot, and then on the other places the density will be lower. So the development density is not directly related to the plot ratio, because if you have taller blocks at one spot and low rise and the other spots, and then there's a better sense of space actually. Now you said that you are going to amend your procedures for logistic land so more sites could be made available sooner. I welcome that. Now the purple shaded areas, those are the logistic sites, but I haven't yet had a chance to visit these sites. Are these vacant sites at the moment? If so, can you proceed with site formation sooner? And so for those who may be affected by land resumption could move there sooner. That's the first point. Now, I've raised this with the Transport and Logistics Bureau on a number of times. You use the term modernized logistics industry, but then the TLB resents that. They still just saying that there will be various logistic circles. So I don't know why between the two bureaux there's not yet a consensus on this. And that's the concern of my sector. Is there actually a logistics policy under the TLB? Now, you mentioned a logistic park. I'm happy to hear that. It's better than the logistics circle mentioned by the TLB. We don't just want odd blocks of buildings. But rather we want integrated development. And then yesterday at the council meeting, there's most debate on releasing women into the job market. There's mentioned something like a mother's circle. That means women can take up part-time work. Well, we're doing that already because every year during certain periods, online shopping platforms will need a large number of workers to pack up goods and so on. So, and now in NDAs, mostly we're talking about young couples. They need to take care of their children, but at the same time, the mothers may want to make some money. So I think near a logistics park, if you have more residential developments, it will be great. Because then the people there living there can work in the logistics park. Because they don't want to spend time commuting, so it's good to have jobs close to them. Now, Mr. Yim Kong raised an idea. If you've been to London, there is a brand outlet. When I go to the UK, I'll go there. So maybe you can consider also an outlet for branded goods in the metropolis. And this outlet wouldn't just serve local residents. Visitors from Southeast Asia will be very keen to visit such facilities. And you could actually, as suggested, ask the land grantees to do the site formation, and that will speed things up. Secretary. logistics park. Yes, members did remind us before, especially if there will be residential developments near the logistics park, because that will be a source of labor supply. Now, Hong Shui Kiu is an important base for logistic park, so we can do that because in Hong Shui Kiu, it will also be a major source of housing supply. And then Takulang, Pingche, we're talking about large tracts of land there. And logistics is one industry we want to promote there, and because this is a large area, definitely there will be plenty of housing supply. So in terms of planning, how do we make sure that two users are close to each other enough? Well, we will look into that during the planning study. As for other views, we will just note them. On the term logistics park or modern logistics industry, yes, we've been in communication with the Transport and Logistics Bureau, perhaps because we use different terms that's causing some confusion, so we'll see if we can do anything about that. Director? The member asked about the logistic land in the Santin Tenable. He would like the land to be made available as soon as possible. Well, that's why we have phases, and because there could be modern multiple buildings for modern logistics and for the benefit of the industry. So we hope to provide that as soon as possible. That's why near Santin here, the site is included in the first phase. And so we do hope that even among the first phase sites, this is the kind that can be made available sooner. Page 9 of the PowerPoint. I'd like to talk about transport. Now there are going to be 3 districts. How are they to be connected? Firstly, that's just the North Metropolis Highway. Mostly it's the rail link, vertically. So horizontally, there's just one road. So when is the Northern Metropolis Highway to be built? And right now, there's just the seriously congested Yuen Long bypass. And then from Shongshui to the existing highway, well, both roads are really busy. If the development of the building of the Northern Metropolis Highway will only come later, then it may affect the connection of the areas. If we're talking about development of twin circles, well, maybe you need to advance the construction of the Northern Metropolis Highway. And then in Santin, for people who live there, actually I live there, I am a bit worried every day seeing all these developments. Probably there will be more and more serious congestion because already during certain periods the roads are busy. So for the Northern Metropolis Highway, say from Hong Shui Kiu to Santin and Kutong, some of the businesses may have ties with each other, and so you need to have proper traffic arrangements. Can you tell us about the program for the Northern Metropolis Highway? Now, I said before, in Hong Kong, people always complain if we start an IT business here is expensive. So why do we want to put IT production in Hong Kong? Because it's expensive. So can we try to secure certain policies on the mainland side, say tax-free arrangement or policy or preferential treatment? Because on the mainland, they use policies to lead development. Can we do the same in Hong Kong?
Perhaps I defer to Mr. Yao, Director. Okay. Northern Metropolis Highway. Thank you for your question. with other railways and highways. The ITIB is developing, the TLB is developing a consultation and study on it. We hear your comment saying that you want this Northern Metropolis highway to be completed as soon as possible. But I would like to make one point. Apart from these long-term infrastructures, when we are planning a new development area, we will look at the timetable for the population and enterprise intake before we plan the infrastructure or a traffic network. When we plan the Kutong North and Hachin development, we have traffic infrastructure planning. So for Untitled Chapter, there will be a highway connected to it, and there will also be Sentin highways and Fanling highways. There will be a widening work on those highways to increase the traffic capacity. On industry development, you ask if we should have a dedicated policy, including policies that requires collaboration with the mainland authorities. When we are working out the I&T policy, this is an important subject. We understand that the ITIB, together with the mainland authorities regarding Constantinople and Long Machao Loop I&T Park, regarding collaboration of people flow and information flow with the Shenzhen I&T Park, the ITIB has been in close liaison with the mainland authorities on these areas. So that answers member's question on new policy. Ms. Elizabeth Quat, please. Thank you. I would like to know about the smart city of the Northern Metropolis, and I would like to know about your plan and if you have any budget or challenges. Secretary, please. Director, please. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question. When we are doing construction, sorry, that's not my question. I'm not asking about construction. I'm confident about that. You have a smart construction, and so I believe that it will you have no problem regarding construction in the Northern Metropolis. But what I'm asking is that you are constructing such a large-scale projects in the Constantinople. You will have people live there and I&T enterprise. In the stage of planning, you will have to work out the details with the direction of it becoming a smart city. If you do not have these kind of plans in play at this stage, then there's no turning back when the construction has kick-started. If we look at other cities, for example, the digital twin, we need to start layout planning now. We have to create 3D maps. For example, smart transport. And in some old districts, we are now implementing smart transport network. If at the planning stage we have a smart transport infrastructure, then when we are executing the plan, it will be smoother. So for the infrastructure of a smart city, you have to engage experts in the planning and design. If you look at Xiong'an new area, it starts out with the smart transport infrastructure. Me and Mr. Look engaged the team of Xiong'an new area to present to us their planning of the smart transport infrastructure. They actually have to consider a lot of factors. So I am concerned about the whether or not you have considered these figures when you are planning the Northern Metropolis. Perhaps Mr. Look can elaborate on that later on. If you have no detailed planning on this, then perhaps you should start now. Otherwise, it will be too late. Thank you. Secretary, please. There are some areas of Northern Metropolis that are still under planning or construction. In these, we do have a smart city concept in some new districts. We will put some common utilities underground, and we will systematically put data in a network. Because if we don't do it now, it will be hard for us to gather all these data and input it into a central data bank later on. We will collate our efforts in this regard. There are some large projects that are still under the planning stage, and we do not have a very detailed plan on the disposition of a smart city, but we will consider it, and I believe that it will appear in our master plan and action agenda on the Northern Metropolis. When we have organized all the information, I believe that we have a meeting on conservation and future city development and layout. We will talk about that in that meeting. Because a lot of basic infrastructures are underground, you have to start planning as early as possible. For example, smart lampposts, you have to think about the distribution of it. And you have to consider maybe sponge city as soon as possible as well, because if you do not consider it at the planning stage, it will be hard for you to catch up. I see that 2 members have pressed the button. I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. I will speak first. We've heard a lot of comments from members in a lot of different areas. Because this is the first time when we talk about the overall planning of the Northern Metropolis. So we hope to have an exchange with the NMCO and the Development Bureau. In the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy, it sets out that 2.5 population people will be living in the area with the creation of 650,000 jobs, and public and private housing ratio will be 70 to 30. For these, it seems that you are adopting the same figures in this paper of today's meeting. This has not been officially discussed in the Legislative Council. So I would like to take this opportunity to discuss with you this. What figures or bases have you considered before you formulate this 2.5 million population? Because as we all know, in the Northern Metropolis, well, apart from that, we also have a artificial islands and land-out tomorrow vision. If we have 2.5 million people here in Northern Metropolis together with the artificial islands population, it actually exceeds 1/3 or half of the population of Hong Kong. In New Territories North, there are 900,000 people with 120,000 job opportunities. There is a serious job home imbalance. Looking at this 650,000 job opportunities, it seems that there is much growth, but there is also an increase in the population. You have 2.5 million people living in the area, so half of the population will be going to other districts to work. So I understand that maybe not every single person who lives in the Northern Metropolis will live there. So I hope that you can enhance the job-home ratio. Looking at the job-home ratio in the Hong Kong Island is almost 1:1. So overall, does the administration or the NMCO have regarding the public and private housing unit ratio and the population as well as job opportunities, have a plan to adjust, because you will have an action agenda very soon. So in terms of planning of the population and public and private ratio, job opportunities, and industries, it actually determines the development of the Northern Metropolis. This is my first question. My second question, I see that in the Northern Metropolis development strategy, you have adopted some NDA, for example, Shuikyu Hachun, Kutong North. There are some things that are new, Chin Pak Lao, Chin Pei Choi, Napat Lai, Ma Chou Long, and there is a Mears Bay and Shuttlecock. For Ma Chou Long and Chin Pak Lao, you are conducting study on these areas, and in 2024, you will have a layout. Apart from tourism in Shuttlecock, you have not conducted the study in other areas. For Shuttlecock and Robin's Nest and Yan Chao Tong, will you conduct a holistic study like Ma Chou Long and Chin Pei Lao? Because apart from tourism, you may need infrastructure and railway station connecting to Shuttlecock. These are the areas that require study. So I hope that you can conduct a similar study on Shuttlecock. Would the administration please respond to these two questions? Thank you. Regarding your first question, it's a very macro kind of question relating to the population and the job opportunities. Now we propose 2.5 million population with 650,000 jobs. When the last term of the government proposed this proposal, these were the estimation made back then. So that is why we need further study, because there are things that we have to verify. And there are adjustments we have to make in the course of study, because maybe some areas were originally planned for residential purposes. Then maybe after study and discussion with members, we can put some industry there. Then with different assumptions, it will affect the population and the job opportunities. Overall speaking, when we have a layout with the number of population and jobs number available, it does not mean that these are new population immigrating to Hong Kong. Actually, the people flow in Hong Kong can alleviate the pressure of densely populated districts. So we formulate these figures based on some assumptions. So it's not that we will have to be fixated on these figures of 2.5 million population and 650,000 jobs. On the public and private housing ratio, for us to conduct study, we have to have some basis and figures, because there is different needs for commuting and community facilities between public and private housing. It's hard for us to ask the consultant to study on a 7:3 or 6:4 ratio. It may prolong the period of the study. So in general, we hope to achieve this 7:3 ratio of public and private housing. So we adopt this assumption. But when we are implementing the plan, when the construction work starts, we will have to look at the actual situation at that time. What will the needs and projections of public and private housing be later, especially in the coming 10 years? we will be supplying more and more public housing units. So we definitely need adjustments. There are assumptions in the study, but when we are implementing the plan, we will make adjustments according to actual situation. Santin Technopole is a very good example.
多謝主。
What about the Shuttlecock study? Thank you. In the paper, we mentioned that the chief executive announced that the Security Bureau and the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau will look at the relevant security issues involving shuttlecock. Now, for the positioning of shuttlecock, it is not an NDA. So in other NDAs, when we conduct some planning and works study, well, it actually does not apply so much to the shuttlecock area. But in shuttlecock, we are mostly looking at conservation and tourism. I mentioned the CTSB and the Security Bureau will conduct a study on the potential of shuttlecock. If they make any suggestions that have to do with land use or civil engineering works, then we will follow up later. That is a model that we could adopt in taking forward a project. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. 2.5 million people, 650,000 jobs. And for public-private housing ratio, you say you will listen to different views and adjust the ratio. You're also actually preparing Action Gender too. So I hope that the NNMO led by Mr. Yao will conduct a series of studies on the Northern Metropolis, and when you are ready to formulate the action agenda, that means we'll be able to see the brand new overview of the Northern Metropolis. Then we'll know what the layout and the plan is like, and if there's a new blueprint, then the community would learn about it. I'm looking forward to it. Probably it will be the end of the year or the early of next year that you'll be able to submit the blueprint on the Northern Metropolis, right? Well, the chief executive said in his policy address last year that this will happen within this year. Okay, that's great. Finally, Mr. Perry Yu and Mr. Andrew Lam. Well, I won't be, I'll be stricter compared to the first round because we're running out of time. Mr. Yu or I and the sector met with the Secretary for Security on boundary crossing point issues and also on the development of shuttlecock. Next year in January, shuttlecock will be opened up completely except Chung Ying Street. Now, we need to open up Chung Ying Street too for us to fully realize the tourism potential, because people in Hong Kong around the world would like to visit Chung Ying Street rather than shuttlecock as such. So perhaps we can resort to technology to resolve the outstanding issues, and then the Chung Ying Street could be opened up too very soon. And we have red tours, eco tours, green tours, and whatever. But then there's always been a problem on the road. You know that from San Leung Tam Road to go by Luk Kang and then Shuttlecock Road. Now for Luk Kang section, coach buses couldn't actually pass through it. So we really have to consider widening the road so coach buses could go from one end to the other, because now otherwise it would be difficult to make this tourist route successful. Now maybe near the Wu Kao Tong, after people visit the Japanese resistance plaque, and then if we want to go to the Law's residence, usually if we take the Luk Kang, it would just take 5 minutes, but no, because coaches can't pass through, so we have to go back to the Thai Post Center town center and then go via Shuttlecock roads. Then we're talking about an hour. So we need to widen the Lok Keng section that will help substantially tourism development. I wonder if the Bureau will consider that. Director? We've heard your views. Yes, Chung Ying Street is a challenge. Because there is not a proper BCP in Chung Ying Street. If you can access Chung Ying Street, that means you could cross the boundary to Shenzhen. So it is a real issue. So when we consider comprehensive development of Shuttlecock, and if we allow people to go to Chung Ying Street, we need to overcome this obstacle, or perhaps we don't call it an obstacle, but this is an issue we need to address. For the Lok Keng section, thank you for raising the point. When we look at the development of Shuttlecock as a whole, we'll bear that in mind. Yes, now if people want to visit Shuttlecock, they have to go on tours. So there is less traffic flow at the moment. But if more visitors are able to come here, then there will of course be heavier traffic flow, and we'll have to see how we can address that. If I may remind Mr. Perry Yu, the next meeting we will look at all the BCPs that will include the issue you mentioned. Mr. Andrew Lam. Well, I've been named by EQ, so I need to speak again. Well, on the mainland, they are actually moving faster than other places. My key point is about the integration of software and hardware. And it's not just about the smart city. For the Northern Metropolis or the Central Artificial Island, Central Waters Artificial Island, perhaps something in the guidelines is already behind the time. I'm worried that the whole planning standard and guidelines may be challenged in future. Actually, someone's challenging that already. But when it comes to smart cities, we want to set standards. And I've talked to the director on many occasions about this. I hope that the NMCO will have a clear coordination function to help with the setting of standards. Because if we don't set standards, there could be decoupling of the hardware and software. For example, software, we are just thinking about traffic and transport management, but then the law enforcement unit may have different standards to follow, or they may have different positions, and then that will lead to some problem. Now, in Hong Kong, we are going to have more land, yes, but compared to other cities, land is still a scarce resource here. People have to compete for space just to put a pole in, put a pole in. So that's why it's necessary that we have a coordination office. As I mentioned, in the Hong Kong experience, they managed to do that much earlier. They provide this water supply and power supply. Second point, now many members and people in the community are still talking about home job balance. Well, in terms of concept, is correct, but then in the 50s and 60s, when we planned for Kwun Tong, people lived in Kwun Tong North and they worked in factories in Kwun Tong South. No, we're not talking about that sort of connection. We talk about financial services in the south and INT in the north. Let's say there's a couple. One is in financial services, the other is in INT, and the children may want to move back from Senting to the rural areas to go to school, and we can't stop that, right? And then Hong Kong, we want to promote integration of Hong Kong with the GBA, but and it's also a moving development. So you need to explain better your visions. If we still talk about home job balance, it seems that we are doing planning in a closed area, and that may lead to undue disputes in future. Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. New energy and power supply. That's the only point I'd like to add. The EEB is promoting new energy, including the use of hydrogen, so we have to consider it. And we're also trying to promote electric vehicles. You can imagine in future all vehicles in Hong Kong run on power, and even public transport operators may introduce electric cars, so do we have enough power supply? And then in Northern Metropolis, we have INT's hub. They may need to consume a huge amount of electricity, say data center. Now in the NT, when people try to install chargers for EVs, there are already problems with a sufficient power supply. So you need to make sure there will be stable and adequate power supply in future, and you need to plan early for the use of new energy in the metropolis. Thank you. So again, it's for the administration to know. So thank you so much, members. For Mr. Yao and his team, we have high expectations of them. Mr. Perry Yu and us, have this idea. Now, the secretary said that the NMCO is not a large office. There are just 30 staff members or so. We actually as mentioned, we support you hiring more people. There should be those in charge of economic issues and others in charge of INT. Of course, there are such talents in other bureaus, but within the NMCO, you need someone to take up such tasks. But then, as the secretary mentioned, perhaps we would let the NMCO start work first, and as Mr. Perry Yu said, perhaps different departments could set up working groups under the NMCO, and that may help to speed up some tasks. It's the same when there's development of the new territories. Under the Territorial Development Department, there were various working groups to work on the different new towns. So perhaps the NMCO can also consider this arrangement. Then you'll see if you need to have more staff within your office or whatever. Because we want we don't want any silo effect. We don't want fragmented policies, but rather we want to integrate the policies. So if there's nothing else, that's the end of the meeting. The next meeting will be on the 21st of July, and it's an overview on our boundary control points. Thank you.